This is the first of 2 lectures in which I go over the muscles that you'll be responsible for knowing for this class. First of all, let me just remind you that muscles only pull, they do not push. And most of the muscles have complicated names, but their names give clues to their function and location, so it's helpful to know what the names mean. There's 4 functional groups of skeletal muscles. There's the prime mover or agonist, and that's the muscle that has major responsibility for moving a specific movement. The antagonist is the muscle that opposes or reverses a particular movement. The prime mover and the antagonist are on opposite sides of the joint in which it acts. They oppose each other. A synergist muscle helps the prime movers. It adds extra force to the same movement or reduces undesirable or unnecessary movement. And fourth, the fixator is a synergist that mobilizes a bone or muscle's origin and gives the prime mover a stable base in which to act. The first muscle we're talking about is epicranius or frontalis muscle. And the function of this muscle is to raise your eyebrows or wrinkle your brow. This muscle is located right here above. It's in the forehead, and when this muscle contracts, it's going to raise the eyebrows up. Next muscle is orbicularis oculi. It closes your eye or winks your eye. And look at the name orbicularis oculi. Orbicularis, you think of orbit, and it circles the eye like a planet orbits like a moon orbits the planet. So the orbicularis oculi orbits the eye, circles the eye. And oculi, think of ocular, so it has to do with the eye. So it implies circular muscle for the eye. So it's a circular muscle for the eye, and it's like a sphincter. When it contracts, it narrows makes a smaller opening, and it completely shuts the eye. It allows you to wink or blink. The risorius is a muscle that draws the corners of the mouth laterally. It's not a smiling muscle, but grimacing. It's basically it pulls the corners of the mouth laterally. And you see where this is located here. Risorius here is attached to the corner of the mouth, and it pulls in a lateral position. And compare that to the zygomaticus major muscle, which allows you to smile. Raises the corners of the mouth. And the zygomaticus major and minor are right here. They're attached to the corner of the mouth, and they go up towards the zygomatic bone. So when they contract, they raise the corner of the mouth upward. The orbicularis oris. Here's another orbicularis muscle. So you think of orbit, a circular muscle. Orbicularis oris, think of oris or oral as being the mouth. So this is a circular muscle around the mouth, and it closes the mouth or lets you purse your lips. The nasalis flares your nostrils, and you see where the nasalis muscle is here. The buccinator. The buccinator is a muscle that I'll show you where it is. Here's a picture of the buccinator. This muscle is a leaper muscle, and it lines the inside of it's next to the inside of the cheek, and that muscle holds the cheek, prevents the cheek from blowing out when you're blowing a balloon or playing a trumpet or blowing on something. It allows you to force air out the mouth without it expanding the cheeks. The temporalis and the masseter are muscles that enable you to bite down real strongly. Here's the temporalis muscle. It's right over the temporal bone. So the temporalis muscle over the temporal bone. And the masseter muscle. Those are chewing muscles. And they're biting, strong bite muscle. Look at muscles of the neck. First one we look at is the platysma. It's a superficial muscle, and it lays over the top of the front of the neck. It draws the skin of the neck, tenses the skin of the neck, and draws the corner of the mouth downward. Here's a picture of the platysma muscle. The sternocleidomastoid. It attaches from the sternum, crosses the clavicle, and attaches on the massoid process. Remember the massoid process of the temporal bone? That's how the muscle gets its name, sterno, from sternum, cleido, meaning clavicle, and massoid process. So sternocleidomastoid goes from the sternum to the massoid process. It flexes the neck and rotates the neck. So that muscle goes in front. So when that muscle contracts, it will bring the head forward and flex the neck. If only one muscle contracts, it's going to rotate the neck as well. If both bilateral sternocleidomastoid muscle contracts, it's not going to rotate the neck, it's just going to flex the neck. Here's the sternocleidomastoid here. It's a fairly easy muscle to identify as a large muscle in the anterior neck. The scalenes, there's 3 scalenes, anterior, middle, and posterior scalene. They also flex the neck and rotate the neck. And they also elevate the first and second rib because they attach on the first and second rib. So when those muscles contract, it's going to pull the ribs up, and it's going to pull the head down, and it's going to flex the neck. The neck's bending forward. Here's the scalene muscles here. The splenius capitis extends the neck. Notice this is in the posterior part of the neck, so it extends the neck. So when that contracts, it's going to raise the head. The head's going to contract backward, and you look up towards the ceiling and extend the neck. If only one splenius capitis muscle contracts, it's going to rotate the neck. There's another picture of splenius capitis here. The pectoralis major. This is a large muscle in the anterior chest. Attaches from the shoulder, attaches from the clavicle, attaches over to the humerus, and it adducts the arm. So think when that muscle contracts, the arm is going to come in towards midline, so it's going to adduct the arm. Since this muscle is in front of the shoulder joint, it's going to flex the arm. And since it attaches on the outer surface of the humerus, when it contracts, it's going to rotate the arm, immediately rotate the arm. So it has several functions: adduction, flexion of the arm, and medial rotation of the arm. If you just look at the position of the muscle relative to the joint, you can predict the movement. If the muscle is anterior to the joint, the shoulder joint, it's going to flex the joint. If it's posterior to the joint, it's going to extend the joint. Pectoralis minor attaches to the coracoid process of the scapula, and it also attaches to the ribs, second, third, and fourth rib. And when it contracts, it pulls the scapula forward and downward. So the scapula is pulled forward and downward, and that locks the scapula in place and secures the scapula to the rib cage. So this muscle acts as a fixator because it stabilizes the scapular muscle for other muscles attached to scapula to work without the scapula being loose and not connected. There's pectoralis minor again, and it lies under the pectoralis major. The serratus anterior attaches your scapula to the rib cage. Here, it has finger-like projections that attach to the ribs, and it also attaches to the medial border of the scapula. Think of serratus as saw. The edge of a saw has jagged, and the it kind of looks like the fingers of the serratus anterior muscle. It's kind of a jagged muscles that attach to the ribs. Here's a picture of the serratus anterior muscle on a model. There's some ribs that attach to the medial portion of the scapula. And what its function is to secure the scapula, to lock the scapula down to the rib cage so that the base of support for the arm is tight. And so this would also be a fixator muscle. Here's what happens when the serratus anterior is weakened. This person raises his arm in front, and the shoulder blade separates out from the rib cage because the serratus anterior is weak. If the serratus anterior was strong, it would hold that scapula in, so it would not wing out. The trapezius muscle is a large muscle shaped like a trapezoid. Each side is a triangle, but there's trapezius on both sides. So when you have both sides together, it looks like a trapezoid shape. It stabilizes, it raises, it retracts, and it rotates the scapula. That's because it's a large muscle and has many different portions of the muscle that can contract. You can contract the upper trapezius and raise the shoulder blade. You can contract the lower trapezius and lower the shoulder blade. You can contract the middle trapezius and it brings the shoulder blades together. Retract the shoulder blades. So there's a lot of different movements, even though it's just one. Even though it's one muscle. Just by the way the fibers of the muscle run, you can tell what movements that muscle creates. There's the trapezius here. The rhomboid major and minor attached to the medial border of the scapula, and it also attached to the midline of the vertebral column. And that muscle, when that muscle contracts, it's going to bring the shoulder blade in towards the midline. So it's going to adduct the shoulder. It's going to stabilize the shoulder. It's going to retract the shoulder. And since it's at an angle, it's going to rotate the shoulder. So it does several things to the shoulder. And you can determine all that just by the shape and the location and direction of the muscle fibers here. There's another picture of the rhomboid major. The levator scapulae. The name levator, whenever you see the word levator in a muscle, that levator means elevate, raises. So the levator scapulae literally means it raises the scapula. So it elevates and adducts the scapula. Look at this. It attaches to the upper portion of the scapula. So when that muscle contracts, it'll raise the scapula up superiorly. And it's also going to bring it in towards the midline somewhat. So it's going to adduct the scapula. Here's the levator scapulae muscle here. The latissimus dorsi muscle is this large muscle here on the flank. It's below the trapezius muscle. It extends the arm, it adducts the arm, and it immediately rotates the arm. This is a muscle that's highly developed in swimmers. So think of the motions of swimming. When the arm swims, you extend the arm first, then as the arm goes in front, you adduct the arm and immediately rotate the arm. So think of a swimmer when you think of the latissimus dorsi. The deltoid. The deltoid does many things. It has many motions. It can abduct the arm, it can flex the arm, it can extend the arm, it can adduct the arm, it can medially rotate the arm, and it can laterally rotate the arm. That's because it's not just one muscle, it's actually several muscles combined together. There's a middle deltoid, there's an anterior deltoid, and a posterior deltoid. If you just contract the anterior deltoid, which is in front of the shoulder blade, in front of the shoulder joint, it's going to flex the arm. That front anterior deltoid contracts, the humerus is going to go swing out front, so therefore flexing the shoulder. If you just contract the posterior deltoid, the humerus is going to go towards the back, and therefore the shoulder will be extended. If you contract just the middle deltoid, it's going to bring the humerus away from the body and therefore abduct the arm. So depending on which of the portion of the deltoid is contracted, you can get different movements of the shoulder. The supraspinatus muscle initiates abduction of the arm. This locates in the supraspinatus fossa. Remember the spinal scapula? There's a fossa above that called the supraspinatus fossa. Supraspinatus, think super mean above, and spine, above the spine. When this muscle contracts, it's going to pull on the humerus, and therefore the humerus is going to swing out, and therefore it abducts the arm. The infraspinatus muscle lies in the infraspinatus fossa. Infraspinatus, it means it's below the spine of the scapula. When that muscle contracts, it's going to laterally rotate the arm. I think it's attached on the outer edge of the humerus. The humerus is going to rotate outward. It's also going to bring the humerus in toward the midline to adduct the arm. Teres minor has the same function as the infraspinatus muscle. It laterally rotates the arm and it adducts the arm. It's a different muscle, but has really the exact same function as the infraspinatus muscle. This is the teres minor. Subscapularis is mounts on the front of the scapula, the anterior aspect of the scapula, in the subscapularis fossa, and it attaches to the humerus also. So when that muscle contracts, it's going to immediately rotate the arm. And it's also going to adduct the arm. It's going to bring the humerus in towards the midline and therefore adduct the arm. So this the subscapularis would be an antagonistic muscle to the infraspinatus. They're kind of on the opposite ends of the shoulder joint, so they oppose each other, so they would be an antagonist to the infraspinatus muscle. Which muscles make up the rotator cuff? Use the acronym SITS, S-I-T-S. S stands for supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. The SITS muscle. Those are the rotator cuff muscles. There's a teres minor muscle that's below the teres, from the teres major muscle, which is below the teres minor. The difference between the teres major and minor, teres minor, as you recall, attached from the scapula, and then it inserted on the posterior aspect of the humerus, whereas the teres major crosses and inserts on the anterior aspect of the humerus. So when it contracts, it's going to immediately rotate the arm. It's going to extend the arm and adduct the arm. Moving down into the arm itself, the coracobrachialis muscle is in front of the shoulder, so therefore it's going to flex the arm. When the muscle contracts, it's going to adduct the arm. Bring the humerus in towards the midline, and this muscle attaches from the coracoid process, and it also inserts directly on the humerus. Therefore, the name coracobrachialis, the coraco process, and the brachial. Remember, this is the brachium, so the brachialis. So therefore, the name of this muscle gives away its location. The biceps muscle. Biceps muscle is a two-joint muscle. That means it's a muscle that crosses two different joints. It crosses the shoulder joint and the elbow joint. Since it crosses in front of the shoulder joint, it's going to flex the shoulder when it contracts. Since it crosses in front of the elbow joint, it's going to flex the elbow. Since it flexes the arm and flexes the forearm. And also it inserts on the radius, so when this muscle contracts, it's going to supinate the forearm. So it has those three functions: flexion of the arm, flexion of the forearm, and supination of the forearm. The brachialis muscle just goes in front of the elbow. It's just an elbow flexor. So the brachialis does not have anything to do with shoulder flexion, because it doesn't cross in front of the shoulder joint. It just crosses in front of the elbow joint. The coracobrachialis here only affects the shoulder movement. It does not affect the elbow movement. The biceps, on the other hand, crosses both the shoulder and the elbow joint, so it affects both shoulder movement and elbow movement. Again, just looking at where the muscle attaches, you can determine the function of the muscle. The triceps is a two-joint muscle also, and it's on the posterior aspect of the arm. It crosses the shoulder behind the shoulder blade, and it crosses the back of the elbow. So it's going to extend the shoulder when contracted, and it's going to extend the elbow. It's a two-joint muscle, so it's going to have effect on both the shoulder and the elbow. The brachioradialis muscle attaches from the humerus over to the radius. It's a flexor of the forearm. The pronator teres attaches from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it connects over here to the radius, and so when it contracts, it's going to pronate the forearm. Think of that muscle contracting and rotating the radius over around the humerus, causing pronation, or radius over the ulna, causing pronation. Supinator supinates the forearm. It's kind of on the back of the extensor surface of the forearm, and when it contracts, it's going to cause supination. It's kind of the opposite effect of the pronator teres. So this would be an antagonistic muscle to the pronator teres. Palmaris longus is a weak wrist flexor. It's actually a two-joint muscle, so it's a weak elbow flexor and a weak wrist flexor. The flexor carpi radialis. Well, the name flexor carpi radialis lets you know that it flexes the wrist. Remember, carpi means wrist, and radialis means it's on the radial side of the forearm. There's also going to be a flexor carpi ulnaris, which is going to be on the ulnar side of the forearm. But this flexor carpi radialis, this is a muscle lies in the anterior forearm. Its tendon goes down and inserts on crosses the wrist, inserts on the thumb, the base of the thumb, and when it contracts, it's going to flex the wrist. Here's the flexor carpi ulnaris. Again, it's a flexor carpi, so it's going to flex the wrist, and it's on the ulnar aspect of the forearm. So it's going to flex the wrist towards the ulna. The flexor digitorum superficialis. Flexor digitorum lets you know it flexes the digits. And there's superficialis, which means superficial muscle, and there's also flexor digitorum profundus, which means deep. So there's two different flexor digitorum muscles. This flexor digitorum superficialis muscle flexes the wrist and it flexes the fingers, but it specifically attaches to the middle phalanx of the fingers. So it flexes the middle phalanx of the fingers, as opposed to the flexor digitorum profundus, which goes all the way and attaches to the distal phalanx. So it flexes the distal phalanx of the fingers. When these muscles work together, you get a good grip and squeezing the fingers. But if you just contract the digitorum profundus, it'll just bend the tip of the finger, just the distal phalanx. You flex the flexor digitorum superficialis, you get movement of the middle phalanx. Now on the extensor surface of the forearm, there's extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi ulnaris. Again, the name extensor carpi lets you know it extends the wrist. There's one on the radial side and there's one on the ulnar side. Ulnaris is on the ulnar side, radialis is on the radial side. And here you can see the extensor carpi ulnaris, how it attaches here on the ulnar side of the wrist. Extensor carpi radialis here. And it goes in and attaches on the radial side of the wrist, and it extends the wrist. Both of them are wrist extensors. There's extensor digitorum and extensor indicis, and extensor digitorum extends the digits. Here's extensor digitorum here. It It attaches. It's a large muscle with 4 different tendons that attach to each of the forefingers, and so it extends the digits. There's an extensor indicis. Its job is to extend the index finger. Here's the extensor indicis here. It goes just to the index finger and extends the index finger only. Extensor digiti minimi extends the little digit, the little finger. Here's extensor digiti minimi here. And the only way you can know that is you have to follow the tendon and see where the tendon goes. The tendon goes here to just the little finger. So that's the extensor digiti minimi. In the hand, we have the abductor pollicis brevis. Abductor pollicis. Pollicis means thumb. Abductor means it abducts the thumb. So when that muscle, this is look at the palm side of the hand. So when that muscle contracts, the thumb is going to rise from the away from the palm of the hand and cause an abduction of the thumb. The abductor digiti minimi is on the little finger side. When it contracts, it's going to abduct the little finger. The little finger is going to come outward.